Back when I was in high school, I used to love gym classes. I was not a bad student, but I really wasn't the smartest either, and I didn't particularly enjoy most classes. Gym class was a class where you didn't really have to know much. You could just be physically active and play sports. For this one gym class, I don't recall which one it was, but I was a sophomore in high school. I was in this class with one of my best friends named Adam. We would talk and hang out all the time. At this particular time of the year, we would go outside sometimes for gym as the weather was nice. It was the second period of the day, so it was still pretty early in the morning. One day during gym class, we went outside to the fields behind the school. There was a large area behind the school where all the sports fields were. There was football, baseball, soccer, some practice fields, tennis, and beyond that was a large woods. We were out in one of the open practice fields playing ultimate frisbee or something like that. I remember that in the middle of this, a school lockdown ensued. The teacher blew his whistle and called everybody to the front of the field. There was probably 20 to 30 kids in the class, and just the teacher to look after us. He told us that the school was going into a lockdown, so we would be entering the school and going into the gym and waiting there. So we told everybody to get in line. From where Adam and I were, though, we realized it would be easy not to go in. We didn't want to go into the school and wait out a lockdown. Who knows how long that would take? Plus, it would be more dangerous to be in the school probably. That was our thinking. Really, we were just being immature kids wanting to get out of class, but we decided to run off and wait out the lockdown outside. When it was over, we could then have a friend let us back in the school during passing time between classes. We obviously didn't think it out too much, and we also obviously weren't too worried about the actual lockdown. We had only had one other one prior to that in our high school careers, and I remember that it was for nothing major, just a minor little thing. So anyways, we got the idea to leave and decided to do it. So when everyone was walking back to the school, we went in the other direction for the woods. We were easily able to get away from the class without our teacher noticing. We ran along the side of the fields and then went into the woods a short ways. The woods there were not huge, but there was a good amount of trees and you could stay hidden pretty easily. We then texted one of our friends who was not in our class but in another one. Adam asked him what the lockdown was for and told him that we were going to hang out outside until it was over. Our friend said that he didn't know, but he just said that there was a lockdown and that was it. He agreed that when it was over and when class was dismissed, he would let us in a back door to the school. That's because all the doors were locked during the day aside from the main front door, and there you had to go by someone. So Adam and I sat on the edge of a tree branch just in the woods and looked back at the school. We went on our phones and talked. I was feeling glad that we were not in the school for the lockdown. We were both wondering what it was for though and how long it would last. Neither of us could ditch school and go home or anything like that, because we were both too young to drive still, so we didn't have cars. We also didn't live close enough to the school to walk home. And with it being only second hour, we had to go back for our next class. About 10 minutes into being outside on our own, we heard a number of cars driving down the street in front of the school. That street was normally fairly quiet, as the school was not right on any kind of super busy road. We looked over, and even though it was really far away, we could see part of the street to the left of the school building. And then we could see all the fields right in front of us. I remember noticing about 5 police cars driving really fast down the street headed for the school. That's when I actually got kind of nervous. I thought that maybe the lockdown was for something bad, and not just them being overly safe for something minor like before. I guess I had just assumed that it wasn't really anything bad. We were texting back and forth with our other friend. He still knew nothing though. After all the cop cars arrived, they went to the front of the school, so they were now out of our sight. Probably 1 or 2 minutes later, we saw something else. There was this man that emerged behind the school. I didn't notice if he left through a back door of the school or came around from the side of the building or what. I only really noticed him when he was already behind the school but still really far away from us. Adam saw him as well at about the same time. We didn't recognize him. The man was walking and then picked up the pace and started jogging. He went through the sports practice fields where our gym class had been playing. Then he started jogging straight for us. We ducked down, even though he most likely couldn't see us at all. I'm not sure why, but neither of us ran away. Instead, we hid. We both went behind a large tree that we were near in a small clearing. We got low to the ground and became quiet, so I couldn't see anymore, but I then heard footsteps approaching the woods. That's when I got really nervous. The man then entered the woods right in front of us. He walked to the right to the other side of the tree and then stopped. Adam and I literally held our breath. Then, after what felt like forever, but was probably 5 to 10 seconds, the man started walking through the woods past us. His footsteps then got farther and farther away. Adam and I both then got up at once and began running back for the school. We didn't stop until we had made it all the way to the front. We saw police cars and a few officers. They seemed confused as to why we were outside, but we told them what happened. The next thing we knew, we were waiting outside the school with a few officers and school staff. This went on for a while until we were told that it was safe to go back inside and the lockdown was over. It turns out the man was a suspicious person that had been seen in the school. He fled after a staff member saw him, but nobody knew where he went. He left the school and ran into the woods. The cops found him a short time later after we told them where he went. He was only a few blocks away from the woods in a neighborhood behind it. So on one hand, Adam and I learned a valuable lesson to not do dumb stuff like that because it was terrifying. But on the other hand, we kind of helped the police catch the guy. When I was a senior in high school, I spent one of my class's first semester as a teacher's assistant for a history teacher in the school. It was a teacher who I really liked and I had had in the past. I would help with any tasks that she needed me to do, which oftentimes was grading papers. I would only have to grade the easy ones, which were assignments with definitive answers, so I didn't have to make judgment calls. It was easy work, but it just took a while. The classroom was sort of at one far end of the school where things were a lot quieter. One day, the teacher gave me a big stack of assignments to grade, and the class was going to the computer lab for the entire period. So I was told that I could stay in the classroom and work if I wanted to. I chose to do so, as there was more space, it would be quieter, and I could also slack off more if I wanted. So they left, and it was just me alone in the giant classroom. I sat at a random desk and got to work grading assignments. Maybe 20 minutes into the class period, and I heard this sound over the intercom. It was followed by an announcement that the school was being locked down, and this was not a drill. This was an interesting situation for me to be in, because I was all by myself in this classroom. I thought about if I should go back to the computer lab or not, but I figured that I shouldn't. I didn't have keys with me or anything, and they might lock the doors. Plus, I wouldn't be able to lock this classroom if I left it. So instead, I walked up to the front of the room, locked the door from the inside, and then turned out the lights. I knew to do those things from the drills that we had had. I was wondering obviously what the lockdown was for, and I really had no idea. So I sat back down at the desk and waited. I texted with some friends, but nobody seemed to know what was happening. After like 10 minutes, I got kind of bored, so I moved to a desk in the back because there was a small lamp that was by it. That way I could keep working without turning all the lights on. So I moved back there and continued to grade assignments. This went on for about another 10 minutes or so. It was very quiet there with nobody else around and nothing going on. Out of nowhere, I heard somebody try opening the classroom door. It was quiet and it made me stop what I was doing. At first, I thought that I was just imagining it because it was so quiet. I listened to hear if it would happen again. At first, there was nothing. Then, maybe 30 seconds later, I heard it again. Then again. Somebody was now trying to open the door over and over, which was locked. This went on for a good 30 seconds to a minute. I was too creeped out to get up and see who was there. The sounds eventually stopped, and things were quiet for another maybe 30 seconds. I was about to get up, but then I heard a quiet knocking on the door to the classroom. It was a very soft knock, and it creeped me out even more. They just knocked once, though. I thought that there was a chance that maybe it was the teacher or a student that was in the class, but I didn't know why they would be out in the hallway at this time. I walked over to the door and then moved the shade to look out the small window. I saw no one. Then I actually unlocked and opened the classroom door to look out into the hallway. When I did, nobody was there. I went back into the classroom and locked the door again. Then I sat back down and continued grading papers. There were no more knocks on the door or anything, but I was really creeped out for the rest of the time. The lockdown ended up going for another 30 minutes or so, and then it was over. The class was let out from the computer lab, and I went on with the school day. I tried to figure out what the lockdown was for, but I never got an answer from anyone. Everyone I asked either didn't know or said different things, so I can't confirm as to what was going on. I still don't know who it was trying to enter the room. Was it the person who caused the lockdown, or was it another student or something like that? Either way, it was really creepy. Something really scary happened to me when I was in high school. It all started one day when I was a junior. To that point, it had seemed like a very normal school year. I was kept very busy as I was involved in sports, school activities, and had a lot of friends as well. This was in first semester, and I played on the volleyball team, so we had practices or games on most days. My best friend Rachel and I had a class together during third period. Between every class, we had our lockers next to each other, and we would hang out by them and other people in our grade. So I remember that one day Rachel and I got to our class. Most of the hour went by like normal, but sort of towards the end, there was suddenly an announcement for a lockdown. Everyone in the class got nervous and was wondering what it could be about. We followed the lockdown procedure. All the students had to move to the back of the classroom. The door was locked and the lights were turned out. We were all told to be quiet. This went on for about 30 to 45 minutes probably. Then it was over. It was announced that it was safe to return to classes like normal. Obviously, the period was over by then, so we left the class and went into passing time. When I got back to my locker, I saw that there was a small sticky note on it which had not been there before. I looked at it, and written on the inside was a handwritten note which said, "I'll be waiting for you." I was very confused when I saw this. I didn't know what it meant or who it was from. I showed it to Rachel, who was just as confused as I was. So we asked a few friends nearby, thinking maybe it was a joke, but nobody knew anything. I didn't connect it to the lockdown at all at that point, as it just wasn't on my mind to do so. I was wondering what the lockdown was for, and a lot of people were talking about it. Nobody seemed to know, though. The only thing I heard was someone say that someone else said some guy was in the school. You know how rumors can be made up or travel in a high school, so I didn't know if this was true or not. But either way, it was safe now as we were allowed to return to classes. The rest of the school day went on as normal. After school, I had volleyball practice, which didn't start right away because we had to wait to get in the gym. So I hung out at the school with my teammates. We then had practice, and it wasn't until like 6 p.m. that I was done for the day and could go home. So I left and then went to drive back. By now the school was quiet and it was getting dark outside as well. After I left the school, I remember that a car pulled out onto the road behind me and started following me. I didn't know that it was following me at first, but then it got really close. When I turned, it turned as well. This continued, and I was annoyed as to why it was following me so close. However, I did not recognize the car or know who might possibly be driving it. I continued to drive home, which would take me almost 15 minutes. The more turns I made, the car was still there. I was getting worried and wondering what I should do. I could not tell at all who was driving. I could just barely see the figure of a person in the driver's seat. It was just too far away and too dark to see any details. When I was getting close to my neighborhood, the car was still there. It was literally just us two out on the road. Before our street, I started driving around the block. The car was still there. I started turning randomly, which the car would do as well. Every turn I made, it made. I then took out my phone and called my dad because I was freaking out. He told me to keep driving and not stop, and he was on his way. I stayed on the line with him, and he asked me where I was. He then drove out in his truck and got behind the car that was following me. At first he honked, but the car did nothing and continued following. It was then a line of us 3 cars randomly driving down these residential streets at night. My dad then drove right up behind the car. He actually hit the back of the car with his truck, not that hard, but bumping him. He honked again. The car then turned at the next street, which is not where we were going, and it sped away. We then went back home, and my dad called the cops as well. We told them about what had happened. It was then after the dust had settled and I was back home that I started to connect the lockdown to the note and to the guy following me. I wondered if someone was stalking me. I went on my Instagram account and realized that I had a bunch of message requests from a user. I hadn't realized this because they didn't show up with the normal messages. You had to click over to requests, which I never did. This user had been sending me messages for days. They started out fairly normal, but eventually he said that he was going to find me and come to my school. I showed them to my principal the following day, and the police got called in. I told them everything, and they did an investigation. I remember that they ended up finding the guy, thankfully. It was a pretty crazy situation, though. I hadn't noticed because I had just been so busy with everything, but I'm glad that nothing bad ended up happening. Many years ago, when I was in high school, I have a memory that stands out as being rather creepy. I think I was a sophomore at the time, so I was still pretty young. We had this gym class, and we would play all kinds of games in it and stuff. We would play dodgeball quite a bit, and we would meet in the gym. So one day, I'm not sure if this was before class or at the end of class, but many kids were just kind of wandering around the gym and talking. We were either waiting for class to start or for the bell to ring for us to be let out. Anyways, I was with one of my friends at the time whose name was Josh. We were pretty good friends, and we would talk all the time in class. Both of us were just kind of wandering around the gym and talking. I'm not really sure why, but we just kind of wandered to this one back corner near the bleachers. In that main gym, it was used for the basketball games, so they had pull-out bleachers on a few sides. They were pushed back to the wall though, but they still took up some space. There was this area where whether the bleachers were back or up, you could still walk underneath them. It was kind of like a walking lane, but that's not really what it was for. Frequently trash would get stuck back there or whatever. It was kind of hard to see, and nobody would really ever go over there. I personally had never been back there before. So we were not going to go under the bleachers, but we happened to walk by kind of where you could see the entrance to go underneath them. When I did, I noticed that there was somebody there. At first, I thought that it was a student in our class, because that was a logical explanation. Josh saw the person as well, and we both stopped to look. This person was just standing there and not facing us, but the other direction. And they were also really far in there, like completely underneath the bleachers, exactly about halfway down. We were looking at this person for a few seconds. The longer I looked, the more I realized that it did not look like a student, but a grown man. Then they turned and looked over. It was a man, and he was not a student. He also did not appear to be one of the school maintenance workers. I would see a few of them around, and I recognized most of them. This guy wasn't one of them. This person wasn't doing any work either, but just standing there. As soon as the guy saw us, we both quickly moved away. Then we went back to where the rest of the class was. The man did not emerge from the bleachers. For some reason, I don't think we told anybody else, like the teacher. I'm not sure why, but I would just blame it on us being young and dumb. But anyways, for the rest of the class, I don't recall anything notable happening. But I do know that the next hour, I was in a normal class again. It was like English or something, but I remember that during that class period, there was a lockdown. It lasted for a while, maybe an hour, before it was finally over. Then the school day resumed. I remember hearing that there was a crazy guy in the school. I realized it was likely the man that we had encountered. How he got in the school, I don't know, but he was hiding under the bleachers in the gym. I'm not sure what his plans were, but I regret not reporting him to a teacher. I'm just glad that someone ended up seeing him and the school was locked down. He was obviously removed from the school and things could carry on, but it still creeps me out to think that I came face to face with that guy. This is the story of something that happened back when I was in high school. It was during my junior year, and I remember that I got wind we were having a sub for 5th hour. This was the last hour of the day, by the way, so when I heard about the sub, I had the idea to skip class. I would not normally be one to be skipping classes all the time, and I should have not done it looking back, but here and there I might skip a class that I hated, especially if it was the last one of the day. Plus, I knew that substitutes would often just take attendance and give out a random assignment. We probably wouldn't be doing anything notable like a test. My plan was to leave my 4th hour class, get my stuff from my locker, and walk out the school doors during passing time. However, I failed to execute my plan properly. I got lazy, and when I got to the locker commons, I was talking to my friend there for too long, so when the warning bell rang, I barely heard it. I was engaged in a conversation, and the hallways quickly cleared out, and my friend then walked away to leave to his class. I then gathered my things from my locker and went to leave. But by that point, basically everyone had cleared out of the area. I was still going to walk to the doors to leave, but then I saw one of the hall monitors come down the stairs that were right next to those doors there. I quickly had to move away. I went down a different hallway and was now kicking myself. I missed my opportunity to leave the school. Now I would have to run around and avoid hall monitors to leave. When I was walking away, my plans were to find another exit. I couldn't go to class now or I would be late. The warning bell rang as I was walking there. I was too committed. So I walked down another hallway and then took a left. When I got there though, I heard footsteps just around a corner. I assumed it to be another hall monitor, maybe the same one I had seen before, and I started walking faster. But the footsteps seemed to speed up. There was a moment where I knew they saw me, because they were in the same hallway as me. I heard them come around a corner. They were still a long ways back though, but they were in the same hallway as me for a few seconds. I thought I was going to get yelled at, but they said nothing. And I also didn't look back to see who it was. After maybe 5 seconds, I turned a corner and was out of their sight again, and I walked even faster. I then went down that hallway and turned again. At this point, I was just trying to get away. I was heading to the complete opposite end of the school. I made it to the cafeteria and kept going. I walked along the edge of it as that was an area where people would definitely be around. When I made it past there, it led to a quieter hallway, which is where the Performing Arts Center was. This hallway had carpet on it, so it was quieter to walk and I couldn't hear the footsteps behind me as well. I also didn't bother to look back and see if anybody was there. I walked closer to the Performing Arts Center, or the PAC, which is what it was called. That's where they would have plays and whatnot. I arrived by the doors and tried to enter, but they were locked. so I went to the left and then around a corner. I had hoped that I could get in there because there were a lot of good hiding places as the lighting was very dark in there. However, with the doors being locked, I went to the left and around a corner. I wasn't hearing the footsteps anymore, but I wasn't going to take any chances. There was this seemingly random door near the PAC that I tried, and it just opened. It led to this small room that was maybe a storage closet or something like that. It had carpeted floors, and the lights were off, so it was pitch dark. So I couldn't really see anything in there, but I could sense that it was pretty small. I didn't dare turn a light on. I just hid there. About 30 seconds later, I heard someone walking by outside. Then things went quiet. For maybe 5 minutes, there was nothing. I thought about leaving, but deemed it too risky, so I did not. Then I heard an announcement. I couldn't hear that well with being in this hiding spot, but I was able to make out the word lockdown. This was crazy. I remained where I was, because obviously I couldn't leave here now. I hid in there and was completely quiet for the next 30 minutes or so. Nobody walked by or anything. Then the lockdown was lifted. I heard another announcement saying that it was over, and a short time after that, I heard the bell, and classes were dismissed for the day. Only then did I discreetly emerge and continue over to my locker, get my stuff, and then finally leave and go home. I later found out that some guy was in the school, and I think that's who was following me. The lesson I learned was to never skip class.